Good afternoon, everyone. This is the news with b.c.begley. I am your host, and it's Thursday, October the 30th, 2025. And now let's get into the top news stories for today. United States President Donald Trump has described his meeting with Chinese leader Xi Jinping as, quote, amazing, saying the two reached key agreements to ease trade tensions. China agreed to buy U.S. soybeans, delay new rare earth export restrictions, and curb fentanyl shipments. In return, President Trump said he would lower tariffs on Chinese goods and that both sides were close to finalizing a broader deal, Politico has reported. The talks, their first since 2019, appear to have pulled the nations back from a potential escalation in their trade dispute. United States President Donald Trump announced on Wednesday that he has ordered the Defense Department to begin nuclear weapons testing to match China and Russia. He said the U.S. already holds the world's largest and most advanced nuclear arsenal, rebuilt during his first term. The move comes ahead of his meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping in South Korea and marks the first potential return to explosive testing since 1992, The Hill has reported. Trump's decision follows recent Russian nuclear tests and echo calls from former advisor Robert O'Brien for renewed U.S. testing amid stalled arms control talks. A massive police raid targeting the Red Command drug gang in Rio de Janeiro's favelas left at least 119 people dead, sparking protest, outrage, and calls for the governor, Claudio Castro's resignation. Residents accused police of carrying out a, quote, massacre, citing executions and mutilated bodies, while officials claimed the deaths resulted from armed resistance. Brazil's Supreme Court, prosecutors, and human rights groups demanded a full investigation into the operation, the deadliest in Rio's history, the AP has reported. Governor Castro defended the raid as a success, but critics, including federal officials and the United Nations, warned it highlighted Brazil's cycle of police brutality and ineffective anti-gang strategies. President Donald Trump met Wednesday with South Korean President Lee Jae-myung, wrapping up his Asia tour focused on securing major investment deals. President Trump praised South Korea as a valued ally and said that new trade agreements between the two nations would soon be finalized, following similar deals with Japan and Malaysia. Lee asked the U.S. to ease restrictions on fuel for nuclear-powered submarines, while President Trump touted what he called a, quote, economic revolution and predicted up to $22 trillion in new U.S. investments, Fox News has reported. The visit came amid renewed North Korean missile activity and ahead of President Trump's scheduled meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Vice President J.D. Vance called for a major reduction in legal immigration during a speech at the University of Mississippi, saying the United States must, quote, get the overall numbers way down to preserve social cohesion. Speaking at the Turning Point USA event, hosted by Erica Kirk, widow of the group's slain founder, Vance argued that American society needs time to assimilate newcomers before admitting more immigrants. He then also defended President Donald Trump's use of executive power and military actions abroad, dismissing concerns about political overreach, the Associated Press has reported. Erica Kirk urged students to continue her late husband's mission to strengthen conservative influence on college campuses. Israel announced on Wednesday that a ceasefire in Gaza was back in effect after launching intense airstrikes that killed over 100 Palestinians, including many children, this according to local health officials. The strikes followed accusations between Israel and Hamas over ceasefire violations, with Israel claiming Hamas attacked soldiers in Rafah, a claim that Hamas denied. U.S. President Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance both said the truce remained intact despite the violence, expressing support for Israel's actions, NBC News has reported. Tensions also rose over the return of hostage remains, with Israel accusing Hamas of staging a fake recovery, a charge that the Red Cross called, quote, unacceptable. Hurricane Melissa has battered Cuba after devastating Haiti and Jamaica, leaving at least 26 people dead. In Haiti, 25 people died when a river overflowed, destroying homes and trapping residents, while one child was killed in Jamaica. The storm, once a powerful Category 5 hurricane, weakened to a Category 2 as it crossed Cuba, where hundreds of thousands remain in shelters amid widespread flooding and damage, Al Jazeera has reported. Jamaican officials declared a national disaster after the hurricane tore through the island, leaving most residents without power and severe destruction in its wake. NVIDIA became the first company to surpass a $5 trillion market value on Wednesday, after its shares jumped more than 4%, capping a surge of over 50% so far this year. The milestone underscores NVIDIA's transformation from a gaming chipmaker to a dominant force in artificial intelligence, fueled by expectations of $500 billion in AI chip orders and plans to build 7 new U.S. supercomputers. The company also announced a $1 billion investment in Nokia to jointly develop 6G technology, CNBC has reported. The broader U.S. stock market hit record highs alongside NVIDIA's rise, though global financial leaders have warned of potential risks of the AI boom. FBI Director Kash Patel blocked an effort by Tulsi Gabbard's top advisor Joe Kent to investigate whether a foreign power was involved in Charlie Kirk's assassination. Kent, the head of the National Counterterrorism Center, had reviewed FBI files to explore potential foreign ties to the suspect, Tyler Robinson, which Patel viewed as overstepping and interfering with an active investigation. A tense White House meeting involving Patel, Kent, Gabbard, Vice President J.D. Vance, and DOJ officials was largely unproductive, amid concerns Kent's probe could complicate Robinson's prosecution, the Daily Mail has reported. While the Counterterrorism Center collected intelligence on possible foreign involvement, it remains unclear whether the investigation into foreign assistance is still ongoing. A North Carolina man, Wellington Delano Dickens III, allegedly murdered his 3 children, aged 6, 9, and 10, and his 18-year-old stepchild over the summer and into the fall. This according to Johnston County officials. Dickens called 911 on Monday evening to confess and is now charged with 4 counts of murder, while a 3-year-old child in the home was found safe. The killings followed the death of Dickens' wife in April, though authorities have not yet determined a motive, Spectrum News 1 has reported. The investigation, joined by the State Bureau of Investigation, is ongoing, and Dickens is being held without bond, with his next court appearance set for November the 13th. Here is a look at the live weather radar from the National Weather Service, and real quick, we're going to go into the weather forecast and then world news, but when we get to the history portion of the show, I did make a mistake. The audio is good, but I noticed that at the beginning, I didn't fill in the date and the month. So when we get to the history section, it's going to look a little funny. I apologize. I wasn't able to catch it until 2 minutes before we went live, so I didn't have enough time to change it. That's my fault. So, don't raise an eyebrow or two when we get to the history section. But here's a look at the live weather radar from the National Weather Service. And let's get into the National Weather Forecast for today. A strengthening storm system will bring widespread showers, thunderstorms, gusty winds, and potential coastal flooding to the northeast on Thursday. Moderate to heavy rainfall is expected across the mid-Atlantic and New England, with isolated flash flooding and a small risk of severe storms in the southern mid-Atlantic. Much of the eastern and the central United States will remain cool and well below average, with highs in the 50s and in the 60s, and chilly lows in the 30s and in the 40s, leading to possible frost. Meanwhile, a Pacific storm system and atmospheric river will bring heavy rain and possible flooding to the Pacific Northwest on Friday. The western United States will stay much warmer than average, with highs ranging from the 50s in the north to the 90s in the desert southwest. 5 more suspects have now been arrested in connection with the $102 million Louvre jewel heist, though the stolen treasures still remain missing, Paris prosecutors have said. One of the new detainees was linked to the crime by DNA evidence, while others may help explain how the robbery was carried out. 2 suspects arrested earlier admitted partial involvement and face charges of organized theft and criminal conspiracy, The Guardian has reported. The October 19th raid saw thieves posing as workers using a stolen truck and power tools to steal 8 historic jewels, including pieces once owned by Napoleon's wives, in just under 7 minutes. Dutch voters went to the polls on Wednesday in a tightly contested snap election, triggered when far-right leader Geert Wilders collapsed the previous coalition over the immigration policy. The campaign centered on migration and housing shortages, key issues also dividing Europe. While Wilders' Party for Freedom hopes to repeat its past successes, most mainstream parties have ruled out working with him, citing his role in toppling the last government, NBC News has reported. The center-left leader has urged voters to back his alliance to block a new right-wing coalition. Sudan's paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, also known as the RSF, killed hundreds of civilians, including hospital patients, after seizing El Fasher, the last army stronghold in Darfur. This, according to the United Nations and aid workers. Witnesses described mass executions, sexual violence, and attacks on hospitals as residents fled the city. Satellite imagery and reports from humanitarian groups confirmed large-scale killings and targeted assaults on medical facilities, which the United Nations said amounted to war crimes, ABC News has reported. Global outrage followed, with Western governments condemning the atrocities and U.S. lawmakers calling for the RSF to be designated as a terrorist organization. An 80-year-old Australian woman, Suzanne Rees, was found dead on Lizard Island after being accidentally left behind by the cruise ship Coral Adventurer. Her daughter, Catherine Rees, accused Coral Expeditions of a, quote, failure of care and common sense, saying that the ship departed without conducting a passenger count after her mother had fell ill during a hike. Rees' body was discovered the next day near a trail, and police said her death was non-suspicious but under coroner investigation, ABC News has reported. Authorities, including the Australian Maritime Safety Authority, are probing how the oversight occurred, drawing comparisons to past tourism safety failures on the Great Barrier Reef. United States President Donald Trump has approved South Korea's plan to build a nuclear-powered submarine, a significant shift from the diesel-powered vessels currently in use. The announcement came during his meeting with South Korean President Lee Jae-myung, where the leaders also discussed broad trade and investment deals. President Trump said the submarine would be built in Philadelphia, but details about nuclear propulsion technology and fuel remain unclear, raising proliferation and safety concerns, The Guardian has reported. Experts noted the move would require strict safeguards under the Non-Proliferation Treaty and stressed that South Korea's submarines would not be nuclear-armed. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said Wednesday that, at President Trump's direction, the Pentagon carried out another, quote, lethal kinetic strike on a vessel in the eastern Pacific Ocean that killed 4 men, the 14th such strike in recent months against alleged drug-running boats. Hegseth characterized the targets as narco-trafficking vessels operated by a designated terrorist organization and defended the operations as intelligence-driven. Lawmakers have raised concerns about transparency and congressional approval, while the presidents of Colombia and Mexico have criticized the strikes, NBC News has reported. President Trump has hinted the campaign could expand to land targets, and Hegseth has likened the effort to countering al-Qaeda by mapping and hunting smuggling networks. CNN has reported that Iran is rebuilding ballistic missile production with the help from China, despite the United Nations snapback sanctions that were reimposed in late September. European intelligence sources told CNN that Iran received 2,000 tons of a dual-use chemical that can be used as solid fuel for missiles, and that some cargo ships allegedly traveled with tracking systems turned off. The shipments may have exploited the fact that the dual-use chemicals is not explicitly banned, and that China told CNN it was, quote, not familiar with the specific situation, while asserting that it enforces export controls. This all came via the Jerusalem Post. Russia's latest drone and missile attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure caused nationwide power outages on Thursday, killing at least 3 people, including a 7-year-old girl, and injuring 17 others. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky said over 650 drones and 50 missiles were launched, targeting critical systems that control water, heating, and sewage. The Ukrainian Prime Minister called the strikes, quote, systemic energy terror, aimed at undermining moral and disrupting war-related activity, urging more air defenses and stronger sanctions on Russia, the AP has reported. The attacks prompted Polish and NATO aircraft to scramble as a precaution, and several regional airports in Poland were temporarily closed. Pakistan and Afghanistan have agreed to resume talks in Istanbul at Turkey's request after previous rounds ended in a deadlock, following recent border clashes that caused casualties on both sides. Pakistan insists Afghan territory must not be used by armed groups, particularly the TTP, which it accuses of carrying out attacks inside of its borders, while the Afghan Taliban deny harboring any such groups. The presumption of dialogue comes amid threats from Pakistan's defense minister of possible airstrikes, signaling both resolve and a willingness to negotiate, Al Jazeera has reported. Analysts note that India's involvement in the region complicates the tensions, with Islamabad accusing New Delhi of using Afghan territory to undermine Pakistan. Today is October the 30th, 2025, and on this day in history, in the year 1485, Henry Tudor was crowned Henry VII of England, marking the start of the Tudor dynasty and ending the Wars of the Roses. In the year 1905, Nicholas II of Russia issued the October Manifesto, granting basic civil liberties and the right to form a Duma. In the year 1938, the radio broadcast The War of the Worlds by Orson Welles aired in the United States, and some listeners even believed that it was a real alien invasion. And October the 30th is also National Candy Corn Day. Okay, I'm going to have to get me some candy corn today. Let's do a quick market update. The NASDAQ is down 0.66%. Gold is up 1.30%. Oil is up 0.10%. Bitcoin is down 1.78%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 0.49%, and the S&P 500 is down 0.29%. And now let's get into the top U.S. national news stories for today. The Pentagon is training thousands of National Guard personnel for civil unrest missions, signaling a possible normalization of domestic military deployments under the Trump administration. A new quick reaction force of 200 troops drawn from disaster response units will be equipped with riot control gear and ready by January, complementing the existing National Guard reaction force expected to be fully operational by April. Across states and territories, a total of 23,500 troops could be mobilized, raising concerns among Democratic governors and critics about overreach and the politicization of the military, the Washington Post has reported. Legal challenges over deployments in cities like Chicago and Portland highlight tensions between federal authority, state control, and constitutional limits on domestic troop use. The FAA has issued a ground stop at Newark Airport due to severe staffing shortages caused by the government shutdown, affecting air traffic controllers and TSA officers who are required to work without pay. The shutdown, now in its 29th day, has led to widespread flight delays and cancellations nationwide, with absenteeism and fatigue raising safety concerns. Newark, already struggling with staffing and technology issues, has been particularly hard hit, with delays averaging 40 minutes and maximum delays reaching 87 minutes, the Daily Mail has reported. Transportation officials and union leaders warned that prolonged shutdown conditions increase stress and the risk of human error, urging Congress to end the impasse. The United States Senate voted 50 to 46 to approve a resolution blocking President Donald Trump's tariffs on Canada, with 4 Republicans joining the Democrats in support, following a similar vote on tariffs for Brazil. The resolution, which challenges the national emergency used to justify the tariffs, is largely symbolic since the GOP-controlled House is unlikely to take it up. President Trump imposed the tariffs, citing Canada's role in the fentanyl crisis, though critics argued the emergency declaration is a pretext for trade measures, CBS News has reported. The votes highlight bipartisan concern over escalating tariffs on major U.S. trading partners, despite limited legislative power to reverse them. Former Illinois Sheriff's Deputy Sean Grayson was convicted of second-degree murder for the 2024 killing of Sonia Massey, a black mother who had called 911 about a possible prowler. The jury deliberated nearly 12 hours, ultimately rejecting the first-degree murder charge, though Massey's family and civil attorneys called the verdict a partial measure of justice. Body camera footage showed Massey complying with deputies before being shot, while Grayson claimed he feared she would throw boiling water on him, NBC News has reported. Grayson faces 4 to 20 years in prison, with the case prompting nationwide scrutiny of law enforcement shootings and leading to Illinois passing the Sonia Massey Act to tighten police hiring standards. More than 1,000 objects were stolen from the Oakland Museum of California after thieves broke into an off-site storage facility on October the 15th, including Native American baskets, jewelry, and laptops. The museum confirmed the theft 2 weeks later, calling it a, quote, brazen act that deprives the public of the state's cultural heritage. The Oakland Police Department is working with the FBI's art crime team to recover the stolen items, Newsweek has reported. The heist follows a high-profile theft of $102 million in jewels from the Louvre in Paris, highlighting global concerns about museum security. The Virginia House of Delegates advanced a constitutional amendment allowing the state to redraw congressional lines if another state conducts mid-cycle redistricting, moving it closer to influencing the 2026 midterm elections. Democrats passed the measure 51 to 42, with the Senate committee also approving it, and it is expected to pass the full Senate, where Democrats hold a majority. Republicans have filed a lawsuit challenging the legislator's authority to advance the amendment and questioning the process, with a hearing scheduled for November the 5th, The Hill has reported. Virginia Democrats aim to finalize the amendment before the 2026 election, with plans to bring it before voters soon after the next legislative session. The United States Senate hearing for President Donald Trump's nominee for Surgeon General, Dr. Casey Means, has been postponed as she goes into labor with her first child. Means was set to be the first nominee to appear virtually before the Senate Help Committee, scheduled 2 days after her due date. Nominated in May, Means is a Stanford-trained physician and author known for advocating holistic health, natural foods, exercise, and cautious use of pharmaceuticals, CNN has reported. It is currently unclear when her confirmation hearing will be rescheduled. Several monkeys were euthanized in Jasper County, Mississippi, after they had escaped from a truck transporting them Tuesday morning and then were mistakenly reported as dangerous. The driver claimed the monkeys were aggressive and carried infectious diseases, prompting law enforcement to take action. Tulane University clarified that the primates were not infectious and belonged to a third party, while 3 monkeys still remain on the loose, NBC News has reported. Authorities are working with animal care experts to recover the remaining monkeys and manage the situation safely. Hey everybody, real quick, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you can stay up to date on all of our news stories. And now let's go into our last block of news for today. SpaceX launched 29 more Starlink satellites into orbit on October the 29th from Cape Canaveral, Florida, using a Falcon 9 rocket. The rocket's first stage, Booster 1082, successfully landed on the drone ship Just Read the Instructions for its 15th flight, which previously included high-profile missions like Crew 8 and Polaris Dawn. The upper stage will deploy the satellites into low Earth orbit about 64 minutes after its launch, Space.com has reported. This marked SpaceX's 138th orbital launch of the year, extending its cadence record and contributing to the Starlink constellation, which now exceeds 8,700 active satellites. Researchers from Stockholm University and Vanderbilt University claim to have found evidence linking mysterious sky flashes from the 1940s and the 1950s to nuclear weapons testing sites in the United States. The flashes, described as transient star-like objects, appeared in historical Palomar Observatory photos that were taken before the first satellites were launched, ruling out human-made orbital objects. Analysts showed the flashes were 68% more likely to occur the day after a nuclear test and increased alongside UFO sighting reports, USA Today has reported. While the scientists avoided concluding the phenomenon were extraterrestrial, the findings renew speculation that UFO activity may be connected to nuclear events. Meta Platforms' stock fell more than 10% despite strong third-quarter results, as investors worried about the company's aggressive AI spending plans. The company said it raised its 2025 capital expenditure guidance to $70 to $72 billion to build advanced AI tools and prepare for future superintelligence opportunities. CEO Mark Zuckerberg emphasized confidence in returns from core business and stressed the importance of heavy AI investment, including $14.3 billion in AI startup Scale AI and the creation of superintelligence labs, CNBC has reported. Meta reported $7.25 per share in adjusted earnings on $51.24 billion revenue, up 26% year over year, though it recorded a $15.93 billion tax charge linked to the federal tax legislation. Eli Lilly reported third-quarter earnings and revenue above expectations, driven by strong sales of its weight loss drug Zepbound and diabetes treatment Mounjaro. Shares rose more than 3% following the results. The company raised its full-year 2025 revenue guidance to $63 to $63.5 billion and adjusted profit to $23 to $23.70 per share, which is up from prior estimates, CNBC reported. Quarterly sales for Mounjaro reached $6.52 billion, which is up 109% year over year, while Zepbound generated $3.59 billion, which is a 184% increase from the prior year. The Federal Reserve lowered its benchmark interest rate by 0.25 percentage points on Wednesday, but did not provide a clear outlook for its December decision. Central bankers are making policy decisions without key economic data, such as inflation and jobs reports, due to the ongoing government shutdown. The lack of data complicates assessing the health of the U.S. economy, CNN has reported. If the shutdown continues, the Fed may delay further rate cuts until more information becomes available. Israeli archaeologists have uncovered a 1,500-year-old synagogue in the Golan Heights after decades of surveying the site. The basilica-style building, roughly 13 by 17 meters, features 2 rows of columns, benches along the walls, and architectural elements, including a tabula and tzada and stones engraved with a menorah. Many items from the synagogue had previously been reused in houses across the abandoned Syrian village, making it difficult to pinpoint the original structure, the Times of Israel has reported. The preliminary dating suggests the synagogue was built between the late Roman and Byzantine periods, adding to the roughly 130 ancient synagogues documented in Israel. Palo Alto-based robotics company 1X is preparing to launch its neo-humanoid robot next year, designed to assist with household chores and other tasks. Neo can move around the home, climb stairs, fetch items, answer questions, and autonomously handle chores while charging itself when needed. Users can schedule tasks via a companion app or give general commands, with expert mode allowing a human operator to guide the robot remotely to help it learn new tasks, New Atlas has reported. Early adopters should expect some privacy trade-offs, as Neo captures data to improve its capabilities, though people in its field of view are blurred and no-go zones can be set. Okay, everybody, that is our show for today. I hope all of you have enjoyed it. We covered more news stories probably than in 30 minutes than any other news show out there. That's the goal, at least. I will see everybody tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time for another episode. And until then, I hope everybody has a wonderful day.